it and talk about inner freedom. So I want to start with the proposition that inner freedom is a steady state of peace, love, and happiness. And when we're in these states, we are actually remarkably, we have this huge capacity. These states produce a huge capacity. So we're more creative, we're more social, we're more generous hearted. We generate more ideas, we act on more ideas. So when we are filled with these states of the soul, of being peaceful and loving and joyful, this is a very powerful state. And it is natural to the soul. We were born this way. And if you've ever been around a baby very much, you would know that they show up peaceful, except for whatever tummy aches they have and wetness and occasional disturbances. They show up peaceful, they show up loving, they show up happy. This is our natural nature. So what happens? I mean, we're not all peaceful, joyful, and loving all the time now. So what happened to us? So, and that's what I want to explore with you a little bit tonight, is that we have these experiences that affect us, right? We have these experiences and therefore these memories that cause a heaviness in the heart, that cause certain limiting thoughts. And these experiences end up covering up our powerful natural states. We lose our freedom. And we're influenced by these limiting thoughts and feelings. So we still have happiness. We do feel happy sometimes, but it fluctuates. We're up, we're down. We're back up, now we're back down. Our hearts begin to feel impossibly heavy. Not all the time, but certain things happen and they make the heart feel very heavy. And the mind keeps returning to these limiting thoughts. It creates kind of a loop where it returns again and again to these thoughts of heaviness and sorrow and limitation of various sorts. So if we're going to liberate ourselves, we have to learn how to control the minds and the thoughts we create, how to manage the mind, how to keep the mind free, and to create these kinds of thoughts. And we have to clean the heart. Now, I've talked in the past about cleaning the heart, so I'm not going to talk so much about that tonight. We can cover that again sometime, but I'm thinking more tonight about the mind and thoughts. And what I'm really talking about is spiritual power. So in order to get us started, I want to tell you a little story. And you may have heard this story before, but I like it very much, so I'm going to share it with you again. So there were two men, both seriously ill, who occupied the same hospital room. One man was allowed to sit up in his bed for an hour each afternoon to help drain the fluid from his lungs. And his bed was next to the room's only window. The other man had to spend all the time flat on his back. So these two men talked for hours on end. They talked about their wives and their families. They talked about their homes and their jobs. They talked about their involvement in the military, where they went on vacation. So every afternoon, when the man in the bed by the window could sit up, he would pass the time describing to his roommate all the things he could see outside the window. And the man in the other bed began to live for those 1 hour periods where his world would be broadened and enlivened by all the activity and color of the world outside. The window overlooked a park with a lovely lake. Ducks and swans played on the water, while children sailed their model boats. Young lovers would walk arm in arm amidst the flowers of every color, and this fine view of the city's skyline could be seen in the distance. As the man by the window described all of this in exquisite detail, the man on the other side of the room would close his eyes and imagine this picturesque scene. One warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing by. Although the other man could not hear the band, he could see it in his mind's eye, as the gentleman by the window portrayed it in these descriptive words. So the days and the weeks and the months passed by. One morning, the day nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, only to find the lifeless body of the man by the window who had died peacefully in his sleep. She was saddened and called the hospital attendants to take the body away. As soon as it seemed appropriate, the other man asked if he could be moved next to the window. The nurse was happy to make the switch, and after making sure he was comfortable, she left him alone. Slowly, painfully, he propped himself up on one elbow to take his first look at the real world outside. He strained to slowly turn to look out the window beside the bed. It faced a blank wall. The man asked the nurse what could have compelled his deceased roommate, who had described such wonderful things, outside this window. And the nurse responded that the man was blind and couldn't even see the wall. She said, perhaps he just wanted to encourage you. Now, what we're talking about is the kind of inner power that the man by the window had. What puts us in bondage is not our physical circumstances. It's the thoughts and the feelings we have about these circumstances. Does that make sense? So, just think about what's going on around you. So, just this week, I spoke with someone I know really well who has everything material, everything you could imagine, and yet is deeply burdened and sad and overwhelmed. If a child of ours has lost his way, we can become so sad about that, so worried about that. If someone we love is at the end of their lives, right, we can become absorbed in that and perhaps the tragedy of it and the pain of it, etc. So these things put us in bondage, and we think it's those things that are limiting us, but it's actually our thoughts about those things that are limiting us. So the man in the bed couldn't see. And if he had been able to see, it would have been a wall. But what he saw and what he described to his friend in the other bed was glorious. So he didn't allow the limitation of his circumstances to limit what it was that went on in his heart and his mind. So if we're going to liberate ourselves, we have to notice what is going on in our minds. Now, each one of us has patterns of thinking. And think about the people you know. You know, each one has kind of a little melody, right? Each of us has a little song that we sort of play all the time. And like I know someone who every time we start a conversation, she tells me, I'm so stressed, almost the exact words, I'm so stressed. And then she begins to tell me all the reasons that she's stressed. So the song in my head, when I think of this one, is how stressed that one is. So each of us has these kinds of recurring thought patterns that run in our minds. And we are very influenced by these patterns of thought. And I just want to think with you for a minute about the kinds of thoughts that populate the mind. So it's a bit of you might think of it as a bit of a spectrum, right? It's a bit of you might think of it as kind of a thermometer. So at the bottom of the spectrum would be negative thoughts. And we know these thoughts, right? I don't need to tell you too much about negative thoughts. The I'm so stressed is a negative thought. I'm a victim is a negative thought. This is never going to work out. I'll probably get sick. All of these kinds of thoughts are negative thoughts, very limiting thoughts, these negative thoughts. Then if you go up a little bit from the negative thoughts, you get to waste thoughts. And with waste thoughts, I think this is like gossip, right? Talking about other people, talking about other things, etc. And then if you come up a notch from there, you get to ordinary thoughts. So here's your calendar and your plans and all the busyness of your life. It's not negative, it's not positive, it's just kind of filler, right? And then you get positive thoughts. So what's a positive thought? Gosh, I've learned so much from this. The next time I encounter this, I'm going to know what to do. I'll do this differently, right? That's a kind of positive thought, a positive framework. And then there's elevated thoughts. These are thoughts of almost a whole different caliber. When we're in elevated thoughts, we have these good wishes for other people. We have these pure feelings. Gratitude is an elevated thought. These feelings of huge appreciation and gratitude, etc. Now, these thoughts that we have are not innocent. By that, what I mean is that the thoughts that we hold create inner states. So they create inner states that either have expansive capacity, that is freedom, or they have limited capacity, and we find ourselves in bondage. I mean, people who are in positive emotional states they're much more likely to pick up the phone and call somebody, or reach out or meet somebody. They generate lots of creative thoughts. They act on more thoughts. They're more expansive. By freedom, what we're talking about is they have the capacity to deal with their situation with lots of imagination and with big hearts. They're generous hearted. So this is this free state of mind, this original native state of mind for the soul, happy, joyful, loving, peaceful, contented, kind, resourceful, resilient. All of that is standard equipment with the soul. And it's affiliated with a kind of thought that is really positive and really or elevated, right? So you see the correlation between freedom and a certain kind of thoughts, and you might say inner bondage and another kind of thoughts. Now, What makes us feel like we're not free is we are influenced. So we are being influenced by something. We think that it's from the outside. So I may think that my boss is messing with my life. My spouse is ruining my life. My landlord, my child. I mean, these people in my life are upsetting me. But actually, it's not those people who are upsetting me. It's my thoughts about those people that are upsetting me. It's the same with situations. We say COVID. COVID has really messed with my year and a half. It's locked me in the house. It's ruined my life. Or news of the world. It's made my life really limited. I don't like this stuff I'm reading about Afghanistan and Haiti, about, political things, about all this heartbreak, these sad stories. It's making me sad. So what we're saying is those things are creating sorrow in my heart. They're creating negative thoughts. But actually, it's my thoughts about COVID. It's my thoughts about the news. That's what's upsetting me, not the thing itself. Or with the body, right? Oh, I've got a bad diagnosis. I have to go through chemo. I have to have surgery. I have to, all of these things. Yes, that is really a bummer. It is really a drag when that happens. But you know what? We all know people who have gone through those situations with a lot of peace of mind, a lot of faith, a lot of confidence. They've treated it as a kind of a learning experience, a breakthrough of some kind. So it's not the thing itself, it's the thoughts we have about the thing that is creating the limitation in the mind, that's creating the bondage. See, when you have a bondage, what it means is that when your mind is idle, what happens is it goes back and back and back to a certain thing. So the mind doesn't just sit quietly. The mind goes back and complains about the body, or complains about the landlord, or wrings its hands about our child. Anytime where the mind doesn't have to do something, it's pulled back, back, back to this other thing. This is spiritual weakness. It means we don't have spiritual power. We don't have inner power. It means that whatever is going on outside of us just kind of rolls into us and becomes our inner landscape. When that's the case, we don't have any choice. In other words, bad weather, bad day. Bad diagnosis, bad day. Troubled kid, bad day. So we're always fluctuating them. Whatever's going on, we then are fluctuating with the thing that's going on. So when we talk about inner freedom, we're talking about how do we begin to gain mastery over what's going on in the mind in a natural way. I'm not talking about suppressing. I want to make a real distinction here, because sometimes people, when they're exploring this kind of thing, think, well, I'll just push that thought away. But that's not going to work. It never works to just push a thought away. So what is going to work? So I would say, number one, you have to notice your inner state. We have this habit in the Brahma Kumaris of playing a little song on the hour. So some of us have it on our phones. And so when it gets to be the hour, this little song comes on. It's called Traffic Control. And the invitation is to look at the traffic in your mind. So whether you have a little song on your phone or you just pause, the point is notice what's going on in your mind. Have I gone back again and replayed this scene, this breakdown with my friend? Have I gone back again and thought about what my husband said that was so rude, or what my wife did that was so unkind? Have I gone back again and thought my child has so much potential and here he is squandering it? These traps, these mental traps, we find ourselves pulled back to these. So step one, notice what's going on in the mind. Step two, bring the mind to a full stop. Make it quiet. Now that sounds so easy until you begin to try to do it and realize what an influence this thought has on your mind. You know, if I've been worrying about my child, I'll just find that every 40 seconds, here it is again. Or if my friend did something that really hurt my heart, over and over again, this scene comes and I think what I would say and what I should say and what she said and why did she say that, etc. So we're in that trap. So bringing the mind to a full stop. It's like you hit the pause button on a piece of music, pause, and take your mind to silence. Now, what happens when your mind starts up again? You do it again. You stop it again. And if your mind starts again, you stop it again. And if it's 8 times or 9 times, you stop it 8 or 9 times. Because that's the only way you're going to begin to get your mind to work with you. So step 2, full stop to the mind, and then move into silence. Now, the mind does not like to be empty, so that it's not going to work for very long. You're being in silence. So you have to bring to the mind a positive thought or an elevated thought and invoke the feeling that comes with that thought. So for example, you say, you know what? I'm sorry this is going on with my son or my daughter, but each soul has their own path. I don't know what's best for that one. So just good wishes for that one. May things go well for them. Or I don't know what started that argument with my friend, but you know what? We've been friends a long time. If it survives this this problem, that'd be good. If it doesn't, oh well. Good wishes for that one. So you replace it with a positive or an elevated thought and the feeling that comes with that thought. You know, when you're looking at thoughts, one thing to realize is that negative thoughts and waste thoughts are very fast. Positive thoughts and elevated thoughts are slower. They're more spacious. They're more, it's like your mind is in slow motion. So when you bring in that positive and elevated thought and you invoke that feeling, it's a slower state of mind. Now, how are you going to be able to do this? How are you going to be able to bring the mind to a full stop, to be in silence, and to replace it with an elevated thought? You're going to have to cultivate spiritual power. Now, if we were in a room together, I would ask you to think with me about what is spiritual power. So we're talking about the power to create and sustain inner states. Not only inner states, but elevated, light-filled inner states. No matter what is going on around you, no matter what someone has just said to you, no matter what's just happened, no matter what kind of a crisis or turmoil you're experiencing. You know, if you've ever been around someone who's spiritually powerful, you would have noticed certain things about them. So, for example, the Dalai Lama. This is a spiritually really powerful soul, very light, very fun. Enters a room smiling, almost laughing, very relaxed. Totally fine if someone says that we've asked him to talk for an hour and he's finished in 20 minutes, he's finished in 20 minutes and he goes. You know, he's got the personal authority and comfort and power of the situation he's in. He is, you feel instantly comfortable because he's completely natural, completely light, completely happy. There may be some who are in this session tonight together who would have met Dottie Janke, because she made several trips to the US over the past. Though she left the body last year at 104, she was here many times, and it was the same thing. Dottie walked in the room totally comfortable. Didn't matter if it was 4 people or 40,000 people, and was light. She loved to dance. She loved to clap. She loved to get engaged with people in a light way. This is true of people with spiritual power. They're able to create inner states, powerful inner states, no matter what's going on outside. Part of it is they have certain spiritual understanding. And part of it is they have certain spiritual practice. So I remember a time when the Dalai Lama was talking about the Chinese and how they had invaded Tibet. And he was getting a lot of pressure from young Tibetans to take an aggressive stance, you know, to protect the country, to comment on the moral problem that the Chinese were having. But what he said was, you know, I really have a lot of compassion for the Chinese because they've made such a mistake. They've made such a spiritual mistake that there will be a lot of sorrow at some point that they'll experience. No anger, no upset, no giving in to pressure, political pressure. So that's where we're headed, right? We're headed towards being people with spiritual confidence, spiritual mastery, the ability to create an inner state that's going to carry us through any situation. This is freedom. In other words, no matter what happens, we're not going to be overwhelmed by it. We're not going to be depressed by it. We're not going to be unspeakably sad about the thing that's happening. The thing will happen, but we won't be suffering because the thing happened. And this is the distinction. It's because the thoughts we're having and the feelings we're having about the thing don't allow us to become upset. Now, how do we get there? So I'm going to presume that those of us who are in this conversation this evening, and you are welcome at any point to type in the chat or ask a question, that we have chosen a spiritual path, because that's the conversation we're in. We're in a spiritual conversation. So this means that we have begun to have some kind of a reflective practice, some kind of a meditation practice, and ideally a practice that helps us to invoke the thoughts and the inner states that we want, because it's our inner states that cause the outer things to change. I'll give you an example. When I was fairly new to the Brahma Kumaris, I probably had been less than 10 years meditating. I had to sell a house. What had happened was I had accepted a job in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was living in Boston, Massachusetts. And the person who offered me the job was a university professor. And I said, well, as soon as you get the funding for the job, you let me know and I'll come in 8 weeks. So he said, fine. And he called me in January and he said, guess what? I have the funding for the position. Now, those of us who live in this part of the country know that Boston in January, this is not when you would list a house. You would list your house in the spring when the snow was gone and the flowers were coming out, etc. Nobody sells a house in January. So I said to Dottie Janke, who I was traveling with at the time, what do I do? How do I make sure that I can sell this house and I need to get all the money out of this house? So I was in a pretty worried state. And she thought for a minute and she said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to meditate on liberation and mention it to a few people in the neighborhood. She said, don't make a big plan, don't get worried, just meditate on liberation and tell a few people. So that's what I did. I meditated on freedom and liberation every morning and every night. I was a kite, I was a cloud, I was a balloon, I was a bird. I was doing everything I could to invoke these states of liberation. And I mentioned it to a couple of people in the neighborhood. The house sold at asking price in 6 weeks. So what was she telling me about my practice? What was she saying? She was saying that I, the soul, could create inside myself an experience of the state I wanted to be in on the other side of this obstacle. And that would be more powerful than making a plan. And so this, when we talk about freedom, this is what we learn to do as we cultivate our meditation practice. So someone may say something to us that really is hard, that really hurts our feelings, but we cultivate the ability to take our thoughts to a place where we accept it. We say, okay. It's a kind of agility. It's a kind of mastery. The ability to say, okay, whatever's happened here is okay. I'm going to be fine. I am not going to be limited by this thing that's happened. So yes, you need a meditation practice. You need the ability to sit and quiet the mind and bring in a thought that's really powerful and hold that really powerful thought. That's crucial, and that's really in all meditation practices pretty much. No matter what you're doing, that's probably what you're doing. Becoming highly aware of your inner state, becoming quiet, holding that thought, inducing that state. What's different about Raj Yoga is that Raj Yoga begins with spiritual knowledge, and then it connects the invoking of the spiritual state to the spiritual knowledge. So the first piece of knowledge is, I am a soul. So the question, who am I? And the answer, I am a soul. Which means I am eternal and that my natural nature is, as I talked about at the beginning, purity, peace, love, and happiness. And that is what I'm made of. That is I am constituted of those things. I may lose track of those things. They may be covered up, but they can't be taken away from the soul because that's what the soul is. It's like if you had a flower, you can't take the fragrance out of the flower. You can't take the petals out of the flower. That's what the flower is. It's the same with us. We are love. We are peace. We are joy. So my understanding that I'm eternal, my understanding that this is my nature, is the ground for my spiritual practice and my spiritual agility, my spiritual mastery. And so not only do I make myself quiet, but I also make myself, I turn inside and I orient to those things that are imperishable. So with some kinds of meditation, you're still focused outside, but you're trying to calm yourself down. I still think I'm Judy. I still think I am female. I'm in this role. I do this job, etc. But I'm going to be a peaceful version of myself. But with Raj Yoga, I turn away from that material identity. I am the soul. I am the light inside. I am naturally powerful, naturally peaceful. I orient to that. I stabilize myself in that as a spark of light behind the eyes. So that's your ground with Raj Yoga meditation. Your second element with Raj Yoga meditation is the understanding of the source energy of the universe. And you know, this is remarkably common in a lot of paths, but I think it's confusing because of the way we think about it. So our understanding of the source energy of the universe, what you call the supreme source or God, is that it's not omnipresent. I know that's a hard concept because for a lot of us, we think, well, you know, God is everywhere. Our understanding is that God is not everywhere. That the spirit is everywhere. Spirit is in everyone. Everyone has a soul, this imperishable, love-filled nature. But God is the source energy, the source presence of life, of creation. The reason this matters is because when we want to pull ourselves into peace or to pull ourselves into love, we need something more than ourselves. If we're in an upset state, it's hard to locate our peace. It's hard to locate our love because we're distracted. Something's really fighting. We're in a little battle inside. So where do I go? If I can't go to my own reservoir of love or my own reservoir of peace, then how do I connect with the source of love and the source of peace and happiness and kindness and compassion and all of it? And that's what the Supreme Source is. It is the reservoir of all of that. It is the soul, the presence that holds all of that through all time in its pure form. So we have that in a form, but we lose track of it as we get attached to things and attracted to things and influenced by things. And when we're groping to get back, that's what we need to connect with. So Raj Yoga meditation has to do with the soul connecting with the source. The soul stabilizing in the form that it's in, its own nature, and connecting to this imperishable, eternal source energy, and then invoking that source energy into itself. This is very incognito. It's not praying, it's not chanting, it's none of those things. It's a very silent, incognito, extremely powerful process. And so as we're doing this, what happens is you do it morning, you do it night, you do it every hour. The more you do it, the more you become aware of the power of the soul. And before you know it, you find that actually you have cultivated this quiet power, this silent ability to locate yourself in a powerful spiritual state. So let me just pause here and check in with you. I see there's some things in the chat here. So let's see. What is the mind-body connection that you have with yourself as well as others? And how can you break it? And why is breaking it so important? Okay, I would say we don't break our mind-body connection. I think it's important that the soul keeps a good connection with the body. You know, the soul needs the body, because the soul without the body really can't express in the world. So there's no need to break that connection. But what we're talking about is influence. So we're talking about the soul's ability to influence the body in positive ways, not to break the connection, but to be a powerful, positive, elevated presence inside the body that allows the body to relax, to move through the world with agility and confidence, spiritual power, compassion, love, etc. So I don't think of it as breaking the connection. I think of it as taking the mind, the soul and its mind, to a place where it's beneficial to the body. Okay, and then from Sandhya, Om Shanti, can you please explain more about liberation you just mentioned here, and how do we use it? So liberation is what we want, right? Liberation is what we're on our way to. Liberation is, it's our aspiration. Why do we want liberation? Because in a state of liberation, in a state of freedom, we can have a sustained experience of peace, for example. You know, the Brahma Kumaris talk about purity, and what we mean by that is that every feeling in the heart is one of peace or love. You don't have dislike for anyone. You don't have remorse. You don't have guilt. You don't have anger. You don't have any of that living in your heart. That your thoughts are pure and benevolent. You don't wish somebody wouldn't, you don't wish ill for anybody. It's only benevolent. This is freedom. Freedom's connected with generosity of spirit. So that's why it matters so much. When Dottie was telling me to meditate on liberation, what she was saying is, what you really want here isn't to sell a house. What you want is to be unburdened. What you want is to be free, so you can go on to the next thing. So meditate on that. Don't meditate on selling a house. Meditate on the state you want to be in, the state of ultimate capacity. I don't know if that was helpful. You need to tell me if you need more on that. How do we remain in a state of liberation when it seems that the external forces are closing in, like vaccine mandates? Well, this is what I was saying before. There are the things that are closing in, whether it's a health diagnosis, or I don't want to get vaccinated and the government wants me to get vaccinated, or an argument with my landlord, or the list is endless. But you see, it's not those things that are making us suffer. It is our thoughts about those things that are making us suffer. You might say it's our attachment about those things that are making us suffer. I've seen remarkable cases of people going through incredible things, losing everything, losing their spouse, losing their belongings, their house, their money, their identity, their everything. And because of where their consciousness was, they were completely free. And this is what we're talking about. How do I create this consciousness? Now, obviously, in a 1 hour talk, that's different from a lifetime of meditation, but I'm encouraging you to develop this spiritual power so that these things don't distress you. So we've got joy. You mentioned family members or life situations that can be emotional triggers. Can changing the thoughts of the mind to see in a good light help transform myself in the situation? Gosh, that's my absolute belief. One thing we have to remember, every soul has its own script. Every soul has a script that has been written by their past actions. Because the action we take creates a reaction. This is the principle of karma, right? So I do something benevolent in the world. I go out and build a hospital or save a bunch of people in a burning house or whatever. That benevolent energy comes back to me in the form of a karmic situation. Now, we don't know where we've been sometimes. We know we remember some of the things we've done. We don't remember everything we've done. We don't remember everywhere we've been. And we certainly don't know where anybody else has been, including our children. So we can feel that we know what's right for them. They need to go to college. They need to get a good job. They need to get married. They need to have children. They need to do this and that. We don't know what's right for them. That's their script. So how do we support someone with love and generosity if we have no idea what's actually up for them? And I would suggest to you that the most powerful energy that you can hold for any soul, whether it's the Pope, the president of the country, or your 4-year-old, is good wishes. Authentic, unencumbered good wishes. Not good wishes if you do it the way I want. Good wishes if you go ahead and apply to the college I'm hoping you'll go to. Not good wishes if you get the thing I'm asking you to get, but just unencumbered good wishes and pure feelings for that soul. Whatever your script is, whatever you feel you have to do, good wishes for you. May things go well for you. May you be happy. May you be at peace. That you can do for anyone if you're unattached. And that's freedom. Okay, so any other questions before we close, or thoughts or experiences or any of it? I mean, this is very deep territory that we're in here. We're into deep spiritual territory. And what I'm proposing to you is that you have the ability to live in complete freedom and joy. There's nothing preventing you from living in complete freedom and joy. It's just a matter of cultivating the inner capacity to do that. And Natasha is asking, when you're faced with choices, how do we know what's the right path? Well, let me just say briefly. So when the mind is in limitation, so when the mind is in fear, anger, sadness, worry, etc., or when the heart is carrying those feelings, the intellect becomes locked. And the intellect is where the discernment is. In other words, we know what's right or wrong because the intellect tells us what's right or wrong. It gives us that nudge, that feeling, that instinct about what we should do, what's the right thing to do, what's going to bear fruit. That comes from the intellect. The intellect doesn't work when the mind is in limitation or the heart is heavy. It'll lock up and you won't be able to know what's right. You'll try to ask other people, what do they think? You'll try to think your way through it. But that doesn't take you to the right spiritual answer for the soul. The right spiritual solution is something that comes from your own intuition. Your own intuition comes from your discernment of your intellect, right? So what we're talking about with liberating the mind, invoking powerful inner states, cleaning the heart, this is the path you're on, right? When you choose a spiritual path, this is what you're choosing. You're saying, let me live in freedom. Let me live in joy. Let me live in love. Let me live in contentment. Then I will be discerning. I'll know what I need to do. I'll have compassion for what's going on for people around me. I won't be attached to outcomes. I'll be able to accept what happens. I'm like the seagull riding along as the waves come and go. I'm just right there on top, riding along. I'm okay. The thing to remember that when you are able to stay in these spiritual states, you are always okay. What has happened to you, you'll understand that that was just right. What's happening to you now, you'll understand that that's perfect and that everything that happens to you in the future will be beneficial. It's a state of understanding. Do you want to do a little meditation before we exit? Any last questions? Are you good? Or are you confused at a more elevated level? So, all right.
It was a very clear talk, Sister Judy. Thank you for taking us through. It was very uplifting as well. There are many comments on social media as well about the talk. So everybody's thanking you.
All right. Well, let's take a little time together. So, why don't you sit comfortably? Your feet are on the floor or they're underneath you. Your head is over your spine, your neck is straight. And if you can manage, your eyes are a little bit opened. They're either staring at something in front of you or maybe they're looking at your lap so you don't fall asleep or drift off. And just bring yourself one thought. First, bring it to your heart, the experience of freedom. I, the soul, am completely free. There's nothing in my heart but peace, love, and joy. And in the mind, just liberation, freedom. There's nothing for me to worry about. I, the soul, am completely at peace. I have everything I need. I feel a wellspring of love inside. for everything, everybody, for the lovable ones and the unlovable ones. And I'm happy, not because anything outside made me happy, but I know that the universe is beneficial and everything's going to be okay. And I remain seated behind the eyes. I'm the spark of the soul. And I experience the natural link of love to the source, my spiritual parent, the oldest relationship I have. And I allow the current of that link to bring into the soul whatever I need. And so, with a full heart and a peaceful mind, I experience myself to be a kind of lighthouse, sending good wishes and pure feelings for everyone who needs it. All those souls in Haiti, all those souls in Afghanistan, all those souls who need support tonight. And I commit that I'll keep myself in that state of spiritual freedom so I can be a support for the world. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Sister Judy, for that beautiful meditation and closing in such a liberating mode. And such simple method and steps to actually practically become free, starting from just noticing the thoughts and how to put a full stop, and then the meditation as well. And your examples and your practical experiences add so much more for us to really be inspired and also be motivated with the possibility that it is actually doable very easily. So thank you so much. And we look forward to having you again soon. And you can find our details of the talks that are going to happen in the following weeks on the website, Peace Village Retreat Learning and Retreat Center, peacevillageretreats.org, and also manhattanmeditationcenter.org. So look forward to having you all again, and thank you.